Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about the evolution of the Persian language, from its beginnings in the Achaemenid Empire to the modern language spoken today in places like Iran, Afghanistan and Tajikistan. We'll focus on the big picture, how Persian grew, adapted and transformed through history, looking at its words, writing systems and the cultural forces that shaped it. We'll keep things simple and avoid diving into technical details about sounds or grammar. But first, before we go into Persian language itself, it's important to understand where it comes from. The Persian language belongs to the large family of Indo-European languages, which includes languages like English, French, Russian, Albanian, and many others. More specifically, Persian belongs to the Indo-Iranian branch, with languages like Hindi and Sanskrit for the Indian branch, and Kurdish, Pashto, and Persian for the Iranian branch. Its roots trace back to the early 2nd millennium BCE, when Iranian peoples lived in Central Asia. Some of these groups migrated to the Iranian plateau, and Persians settled in a region called Fars in modern-day Iran, where Old Persian developed. Historical records such as Assyrian texts from the 9th century mentioned Persians in the region, indicating their early presence. Their language incorporated many vocabulary from neighboring groups, notably the Medes, another Iranian people, whose terms for administration and military were adopted. Additional influences include non-Iranian languages like Akkadian or Elamite, indicating diverse cultural interactions. Now we'll go into the Persian language itself, and we'll start with Old Persian. It was spoken between about 550 BCE and 330 BCE, during the time of the Achaemenid Empire, one of the biggest empires ever. The Persians called their own language Arya, which basically means Iranian. It's the oldest known form of what we now call the Persian language. Old Persian was used for royal proclamations and inscriptions, reflecting the authority of the king. Of course, other languages were also used in the empire, such as Aramaic for administration and Elamite for records, but Persian held a privileged status as the language of the imperial power and ideology. This blending of linguistic elements underscores the empire's role as a crossroad of ancient civilizations. The language was written using the cuneiform script, an old writing system which was specifically adapted to the language around 522 BCE, likely under Darius the Great. Unlike the other cuneiforms of Mesopotamia, using hundreds of signs for hundreds of words, the Old Persian cuneiform was largely simplified, using about 36 signs to represent sounds and a few logograms for entire words like king or country. The script was written from left to right and inscribed on materials like stone for monuments or clay for tablets. The script was used only for royal inscriptions, not everyday documents which were typically written in Aramaic or Elamite. The signs formed by wedge-shaped impressions were meticulously crafted, especially in monumental carvings. The adaptation of the script was a deliberate act to distinguish the Persian communication, emphasizing the empire's prestige and authority. There aren't a lot of Old Persian texts remaining, but they are essential to understand the Achaemenid history. The royal inscriptions were mostly found on monuments, tombs or palace walls, with some appearing on clay tablets or seals. The texts mostly focus on royal achievements, divine support and imperial authority. The most significant one is the Bisotun inscription, ordered by Darius the Great around 522 BCE and located on a cliff near Karmanshah in Iran. This trilingual inscription, written in Elamite, Persian and Akkadian, recounts the rise to power of Darius and his suppression of rebellions. The discovery of these inscriptions in the 19th century was essential for scholars like Henry Rawlinson because it allowed him to decipher the cuneiforms and to unlock the access to multiple ancient languages. Other important texts are the ones found in Persepolis, the Achaemenid capital, found on palace walls, foundation tablets and reliefs. They mention royal constructions and lineage. Also, at Nakhcherostam, tomb inscriptions honor kings and invoke Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian deity. Other texts were also found in regions as far as Turkey, Egypt and Armenia, indicating the empire's vast reach. The Old Persian vocabulary that we have is small, but it contains words still used today. For example, we have Khshayatiya, meaning king, which evolved into modern Persian Shah. And we also have Martya, meaning a man or a person, which became in modern Persian Mard. Nevertheless, with the evolution of the language, some late Achaemenid inscriptions, like those from Artaxerxes III, show errors, indicating that even scribes struggled with the language back then. Old Persian definitely ceased to be a spoken language after the empire's fall in 330 BCE to the Greeks led by Alexander the Great. But despite its decline, the Old Persian's influence was still there in the evolution of the language and in the cultural legacy of the Achaemenid Empire. As Greek and Aramaic became dominant, Old Persian gradually evolved into Middle Persian with simplified structure and a new script. The old cuneiform script was abandoned and replaced by scripts derived from Aramaic, a major Semitic language of the Middle East. The main script was called Pahlavi, named after the Parthian people who ruled Iran after the Greeks. The Pahlavi script was written from right to left, like Arabic or Hebrew, and mostly focused on consonants. A unique feature of the Pahlavi script was the huzvaresh, also called heterogram in English. It means that the scribes would write a word in Aramaic, but they would read it in Persian. So for example, they would take the word Malik, which in Aramaic means king, but they will read it and pronounce it as the word Shah in Persian, meaning king. This system likely came from the days of the Achaemenid Empire, when Aramaic was used as an administration language, and it stuck around. Now there was different types of Pahlavi scripts. First, there was the inscriptional Pahlavi, which was used on rocks, coins, or seals. It was very bold and clear, and it was meant to last forever. Then there was Book Pahlavi, a simplified cursive version of the Pahlavi script used for writing books. It was a bit harder to read because there was fewer letters, but it was easier and quicker to write. We also have Psalter Pahlavi, which was used by Christian communities to translate parts of the Bible, especially the Psalms, and was found in places like modern-day East Turkestan. As another type of religious script, we have the Manichaean script, used by followers of Manichaeism, a kind of a blending of Iranian religions, Christianism, and Buddhism. And finally, there is the Avestan script, which was created during the Sasanian Empire to write Zoroastrian texts which were initially orally transmitted in Avestan language, a very old Iranian language. But the script was also used for Middle Persian sometimes, especially to write religious explanations. And it was easier to read because there was more signs to indicate vowels. These manuscripts show how versatile Middle Persian was. It was used in different scripts for different communities, for different purposes, from royal inscriptions to sacred hymns. Now that we've talked about the script, what exactly is Middle Persian? Middle Persian, also called Parsig, was the main language of the Sasanian Empire, which ruled from about 224 CE to 651 CE. The language most likely isn't a direct descendant of the Old Persian found on inscriptions, but rather a descendant of very close dialects. It was the language of kings, priests, merchants, and everyday people in a vast empire stretching from modern-day Iraq to parts of Central Asia. Because it was the language of the empire, it spread very far and very wide. People would use it for religious ceremonies, official documents, and even stories. At that time, the Sasanian Empire was a major country, rivaling with the Roman Empire. Middle Persian was the official language of the court, used by kings like Shapur I or Khosrow II, and they used it to issue decrees, mint coins, or carve inscriptions on cliff or monuments. Beyond government, Middle Persian was also the main language of the Zoroastrian religion. The priests used it to write explanations of texts which were initially in Avestan. And as we've seen earlier, it wasn't just the language of Zoroastrians, it was also the language of other religions of the empire like Christianism or Manichaeism, and they would use it to write their hymns or teachings. After Arabs conquered the Sasanian Empire in 651, the Middle Persian language didn't just disappear overnight. It was still used by Zoroastrian communities to write texts. And because of this, most of what we know of Middle Persian language comes from religious texts, especially the Zoroastrian ones. But it's enough to see the richness of the language. Of course, we also have smaller texts found on coins, seals, or pottery, showing that the language was used in everyday life. Over time, as Islam was spreading, the language evolved into New Persian, adopting the Arabic script and many Arabic words. But the influence of Middle Persian didn't stop when it ended being spoken. Even though the language transformed gradually into New Persian by adopting new ideas, new words, and new traditions, still the core vocabulary and the structure of the language still came from Middle Persian. And Middle Persian also shaped other languages as well. Many Middle Persian words can be found in Armenian, Georgian, and even Arabic, showing the reach of ancient Iran at this time. Now let's get back to history. With the fall of the Sasanian Empire, Arabic became the main language for government, learning, and religion. But Persians didn't want to forget their traditions. Of course, they accepted Islam, but they wanted to keep their identity alive. By the 8th century, the Islamic world was huge, stretching from Spain to Central Asia. The Arab rulers, called the Abbasids, were based in a city called Baghdad, so very close from Iran, but quite far from the Eastern Persian world. This gave Persians a chance to rebuild their culture in places like Khorasan and Transoxiana, places that are now between Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. Around the 9th century, something quite special happened. The Persians started to write their language again, this time using the Arabic script, but with a few additional letters for sounds that existed in Persian but didn't exist in Arabic. This new form of Persian is called New Persian, and it marked the start of a golden age. This language blended the old with the new. It carried the spirit of ancient Iran, but in a world shaped by Islam. Persians used it to write poetry, tell stories, and record knowledge. And it spread to a vast area, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the coasts of Central Asia. This period from 800 to 1200 CE saw Persian language become a bridge between different peoples. Turks, Arabs, and others learned it, making it a shared prestige language. The first big step came under a dynasty called the Samanids, who ruled from 874 to 999. Their capital was Bukhara, a bustling city in what's now Uzbekistan. The Samanids saw themselves as heirs to ancient Persian kings. They built libraries, supported poets, and made Persian the language of their courts. They even paid for translations of Arabic books into Persian, so more people could read them. Next came the Ghaznavids, from 999 to 1186. They were a Turkic dynasty, but they loved Persian culture. Their capital, Ghazni, in modern-day Afghanistan, became a hub for poets and writers. They supported grand works of literature that spread Persian's fame far and wide. Finally, the Seljuks, from 1037 to 1194, took Persian culture to new heights. They ruled a huge empire and used Persian for government and art. Under these dynasties, Persian was a symbol of pride, creativity, and power. This period gave us some great stories and poems. First, there's Rudaki, who lived in the 9th and 10th centuries. He's called the father of Persian poetry. He worked for the Samanid kings and wrote about love, nature, and life, like all poets basically. Though most of his poems are lost nowadays. Then there's Firdausi, the creator of the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. Finished around 1010, this is one of the world's biggest epic poems. It tells the story of Persia from the dawn of time to the Islamic conquest. The Shahnameh was a way to keep Persian history alive. But Persian wasn't just for poetry. Writers used it for history, science, and religion. Early New Persian kept Persian culture alive after a time of conquest and change. It blended the old Persian world with the new Islamic one, creating a unique identity. The Shahnameh and other works reminded people of their history, while Islamic writings and poetry gave them wisdom. It connected people across Iran, Central Asia, and even India. Later empires like the Mughals in India and the Ottomans in Anatolia used Persian in their courts because of its prestige, and thus it influenced other languages like Turkish and Urdu and left a mark on global culture. But it wasn't always easy. Many early Persian writings were lost because paper doesn't last forever and wars destroyed libraries. The earliest copies of the Shahnameh, for example, come from centuries later. Also, Arabic was still the main language for religion and science, and this new form of Persian used a bunch of Arabic vocabulary words. But this didn't stop Persian from growing, far from it. Writers and rulers kept pushing, creating a language that could express ideas related to emotions, science, and religion. Now let's move to the period starting around 1800, when Persian entered its modern phase. This was a time of big changes, as Iran and nearby regions faced new challenges and ideas from Europe and beyond. In Iran, the Qajar dynasty ruled from 1789 to 1925. During this time, Persia started connecting more with Europe, and new ideas came in. People began writing newspapers, translating European books, and using Persian in new ways, like for modern schools and laws. The constitutional revolution in Iran from 1905 to 1911 was a huge moment. It pushed for democracy and made Persian the language of new ideas about freedom and rights. Under the Pahlavi dynasty from 1925 to 1979, Iran worked hard to make Persian more standard. The Tehrun dialect became the basis for Iranian Persian, or Farsi, used in schools, radio, and government. A group called the Academy of Persian Language and Literature was created in 1935 to keep Persian pure by making new words from old Persian roots instead of borrowing foreign ones. For example, they changed the Arabic word tayyare for airplane to the Persian word havapeyma. After the revolution of 1979, the new government also focused on protecting Persian culture and language. The government encouraged using Persian in media like TV and radio and made efforts to limit foreign words, especially those from English, because America is evil. At the same time, Persian kept growing as a language of literature and art, with many writers and filmmakers. In Afghanistan, the version of Persian called Dari became a key language. Dari was used in schools, poetry, and government, but it kept some older words and styles that made it a bit different from Iran's Farsi. In Tajikistan, Persian is called Tajik, and it faced a big change when the Soviet Union, which ruled from the 1920s to 1991, made Tajiks use the Cyrillic alphabet, like Russian, instead of the Persian script. Even today, they still largely use the Cyrillic alphabet. This makes Tajik look different, even though it's very close to Farsi and Dari in meaning. These three main versions of Persian language, Farsi, Dari, and Tajik, are so close that speakers can understand each other, like cousins speaking slightly different versions of the same language. Farsi is the most widely spoken, with about 70 million native speakers. Dari is used in Afghanistan, especially in cities like Kabul, but the main language of the country is Pashto, another Iranian language. About 20 million people speak Dari as a native tongue. Tajik is spoken in Tajikistan and parts of Uzbekistan, with about 10 million speakers. It has more Russian words because of the Soviet rule. There are also smaller dialects like Hazaragi spoken by the Hazara people in Afghanistan, which has some Mongolian words. In Iran, dialects like Lari in the south or Khorasani in the east have their own unique words and expressions. These dialects can show how diverse Persian is, even within one country. Today, Persian is a vibrant language that's keeping up with the modern world. It's one of the top languages used on the internet, with millions of people chatting, blogging, and posting in Persian on social medias. Nowadays, Persian is the 12th most used language online. People in the Persian diaspora, in places like the US, Canada, or Europe, also use Persian online to stay connected to their roots. Globalization has of course brought more English words into Persian, especially for tech and pop culture. The Persian language has a fascinating history. It started in ancient empires and has evolved into the modern forms of Farsi, Dari, and Tajik. It has constantly adapted, from ancient carvings to classic poetry to today's standard language, while still holding onto its essential character. Shaped by conquests and cultures, it has been the language of kings, poets, and ordinary people for centuries. Today, Persian remains a vibrant and vital link between its rich past and the modern world. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If it's the case, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comment if there are some Persian words in your language. See ya!